I'm going to change the spark plugs on my Jaguar XK8, and back when I was a kid the spark plugs were right there and easily accessible, but in modern cars they have them all hidden away and tucked behind stuff so you can't get to them. So it's a little bit more complicated, but it's still pretty simple to do. This thing right here that says Jaguar on it, that's a cover that covers the little coil packs, and underneath the coil packs is the spark plugs. So you have to remove this cover to get to the coil packs, to remove the coil packs. But to get this cover off, you have to take off this piece right here, and to get this piece off, you have to take off the oil cap first, because it's securing this thing. There's 4 screws that hold this little top shroud in, and they're just little quarter turn fasteners, so you don't have to really unscrew them. You just turn them a quarter turn, and they pop right out. And then this whole thing will lift up, and you can just set it off to the side. And then once it's out of the way, the edge of it was covering the top edge of this cover for the coils here. This is a little bit more difficult to remove. It's held in with some little pins that just snap in place, and if you lift it upward, you can feel them pop out. Not very tight, and now I've got it popped out. Now I've got to kind of maneuver it out of here, and what I figured out the best way to do is to kind of maneuver it under that, and then take it this way, and slide it out, then the whole thing comes out, and you can set it off to the side too. Now we can get to these coil packs that get some better light on them down there. Maybe you can see them. That's them right there. These 4 things, they're all right on top of the spark plugs. So to take the spark plugs out, there's a connector on the back end of the little coil pack. You got to disconnect the connector, which is just squeezing it and pulling it off. And I say it's easy, but of course I'm going to have trouble. So you squeeze it and you pull it off, and then I want to take that bolt out, take the coil pack off, and then remove the spark plug. I'll do that in just a second. Alright, I already did my first one. That was just to make sure I knew how to do it before putting it on video and embarrassing myself. So I've done this one here. Now I'm going to do this one. There's a little nut that holds the coil pack on, and then you just put a little socket on there. I've already loosened this. So you take the nut off. It's pretty easy to take off. And you set the nut to the side. Then this little coil pack that sits on top of the spark plug is pretty easy to remove. There's a connector on it that's still connected, but it's easier to get the connector off once you've lifted the coil pack out. So you just kind of jiggle it back and forth, and it slides off really easily. And then once it's a little bit loose, you can squeeze the connector here on the top and jiggle it back and forth and get it to come off. And then once the connector's off, the coil pack just slides right out, and that's it. You set it off to the side, and then you take your extension with your socket on there. And this socket's a special socket. Actually, this is a 5/8 16 millimeter, but it's got a little rubber thing in there that grips the spark plug when you put it on top of it. So I slide it in there, and it's really deep to get back down there to the spark plug. You put that down there, get your wrench, which I have here, and remove the spark plug. And once it's loose, you should be able to just twist it with your fingers. And the spark plug just lifts right out, stuck to the socket. Next thing I need to do is take the new spark plug. I've already gapped it to the proper gap, which is according to the Jaguar JTIS, it's 0.044 inches, and you just do that by taking this little tool, which is like a wedge, and at the proper point, which is 0.044 on this one, or 0.044, you just slide it under there until this thing just slides through, which it can, which means it's the proper gap now. You put the spark plug in here. Before I put it in, I want to put a little tiny bit of oil on the threads. My dad always told me to lubricate the threads of the spark plug before you put it on there so that it didn't seize to the engine, and that way you'd never be able to remove it if it got seized in there. So I'm going to go put a little bit of oil on there, and I'll be right back. Alright, I got the little bit of drop of oil on there. It just takes 1 or 2 drops on the threads. Then you just guide it back down into the hole there. And this isn't difficult, it's not tricky, it's just you don't want to cross thread it, because if you cross thread it, it takes just about a complete engine rebuild to get the threads redone. So go backwards a little bit before you start twisting forwards to make sure that the threads aren't cross threaded. And then with the lubrication on there, it's just twist right in. There's no problem. If you feel any resistance whatsoever, make sure you back off and start over. So now I've got it finger tight. Now I pull out the torque wrench, and the torque value is 18 foot-pounds. So I've got my torque wrench set to 18 foot-pounds. I put it on there and just tighten it down so my torque wrench indicates it's tight. There it is right there. Alright, now take the torque wrench off. And on the first one I had a little bit of trouble because the socket got stuck to the spark plug, but I put a drop of oil on the little rubber boot inside the socket, so now I should be able to just jiggle this back and forth and lift it off of there. Yeah, it wasn't stuck on this time. So now the spark plug's in place. All I got to do is put my coil pack back down there. It just slides right over top of the spark plug, slide the connector on, kind of jiggle it in place to help seat it. And all that's left is to put this last nut on. And the JTIS says to torque this nut to 5 Newton meters, which is barely more than finger tight. So I'm just going to tighten it up there, put the wrench on, and give it a little bit of a turn. And that's good right there. Alright, that's how you do one of the spark plugs. Now I've got to do 2 more, and then on the other side I have to take off the air cleaner and the intake, but I'll get to that in just a minute. One little tip here. On this last one, getting enough torque on the wrench. Okay, first of all, on this last one, this thing right here gets in the way of my 2 extensions together, so I can only use 1 extension. And then with just 1 extension, getting the extension down in there in the wrench, there wasn't a whole lot of room. I kept, but the wrench was like right here, and I kept hitting that thing. And then this right here, the entire thing just screws off. I mean, of course, the cap screws off, but the entire tube, that tube just comes off, so you can just take it off. And once it was out of the way, I had plenty of room to maneuver the wrench around down in there. And then you can just screw that thing right back on. Just a little tip that might save you 5 minutes of banged knuckles. On this side of the car, we have to deal with the air cleaner and this entire intake assembly. The easy way to get this stuff off of here is just act like you're changing your air filter by popping off these little spring clips here and here and here. And there's one on the back, or maybe there's 2 on the back, but I'll remove that thing, and then I can lift this off. There's a single screw. There's a band that holds that onto the throttle body, and I can remove that from the throttle body and lift this whole assembly off. All right, I got the intake assembly here lifted off. The air filter goes right down in here, and that goes right there. This whole assembly goes together like that. And then there's just a single hose clamp that holds the intake assembly here onto the throttle body. There's also a connector right here by this round thing that you have to disconnect from the intake. But once you get those things out of the way, all you're left with is this little piece right here, which is just like on the other side. It's just a cover that goes over your coil packs. So you can set it to the side, and it's the same thing, removing the coil packs, changing the spark plugs, and putting everything back together.